us that you're going to be doing this big group activity. You don't have to tailor it just to the two of us here. But
right.
You can ask us questions. We'd be happy to answer for you.
Good.
So have fun.
Okay, thanks. So this next particular coaching model is a perfect complement to our first coaching model. We talked about the emotional tank and connecting ourselves as coaches with our players and our players with each other. And that builds like a really good foundation for what we're going to talk about next, which is about getting our players more motivated and getting to improve. We think this is really kind of like one fits the other. I know at one time, and this is just a little bit off record though, I think the PCA had the models reversed a little bit in terms of what went first.
Yep.
But this really makes sense because as a coach, we really want to connect first. And that's the foundation for everything that we do beyond that. So this is called the Elm Tree of Mastery. It stands for effort, learning, and mistakes are actually okay. We welcome mistakes because that's part of the learning process. So going back to 1998 with Jim Thompson, when he was formulating the ideas for the PCA, he was looking kind of at that, what's that secret sauce of sports psychology? Really, what is it all about that gets people to be more motivated and get performance to be better? And that really has to do with controlling. So controlling what you can control and blocking out everything else. Controlling what you can control and blocking out everything else. That's really worth repeating. So let me ask you a question. If you just think about the sports arena and college athletes, how easy do you think it is for college athletes to control what they can control on the field and block everything else out? If you think it's easy, raise your hand. If you think it's hard, raise your hand. Okay, so it's pretty much unanimous. Everybody thinks that that's really hard. And Ruben, as a famed college coach, you probably know that better than anybody. The other part too, that if you look at the pro sports, do you think that's easy for professional athletes or that it's hard? Who thinks it's easy?
I still think it's hard. I still think it's hard.
So on television last week was the movie The Love of the Game. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. Who's seen the movie?
I saw some of the trailers, I think.
Yeah, I've never seen the whole thing. I've seen parts of it.
Okay. So they have a terrific sequence. It's about Kevin Costner. It's kind of like a sappy love story, but it's a really good baseball movie in terms of how they film the baseball sequencing. He's on the mound in the final game of the season. He's pitching for the Detroit Tigers. He's 40 years old. He's had a great career. The Yankee fans have filled Yankee Stadium. He's playing in the Yankees. They're fighting for a playoff spot. So you can imagine how the Yankee fans are. Kelly, you can imagine how Philadelphia fans are in an environment like that.
I know, well.
New York and Philadelphia fans are pretty similar that way. So he's looking around the mound, looking around the field, and he's noticing how crazy the fans are. He looks behind the plate. There's one fan that's yelling at him, basically cursing at him, but in a nice way on TV. Of course, it was blocked out a little bit. There's another fan on the other side cursing at him also. And he's shaking his head saying, oh, I always know when I'm in New York, you know? So he's kind of taking in that whole atmosphere. And then what happens is he goes into this mode of controlling what he can control and blocking out the rest. So he says to himself, clear the mechanism right before the first pitch. And this is kind of baseball lingo that pitching coaches use with pitchers. Clear the mechanism. And what happens then is the entire stadium goes blank. It all goes into soft focus. And behind him, around home plate, the guys are yelling. He can see the guys standing up, but there's no words coming out. There's no sound at all. And he's only focused on the catcher and the batter, and then he delivers the pitch. So clearly he's had some sports psychologists that has helped him through the years. Now, again, he's 40 years old. He's a storied pitcher. Basically how to focus on what's the most important thing, and that's the next pitch. So I have to ask you, with kids, how easy is it for them to clear the mechanism, to basically block out everything on the field and focus what they need to focus on? Is it easy or hard, or do you want to have any comments on that?
I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard.
Why do you think that is?
Because I just think little kids especially are so they want to please. They want to please their parents. They want to please their coach. And they're so influenced by their peers that a bird flies by and my kids get distracted. So I just think that it's just really hard to do.
Right.
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. I think I agree with for the most part, with Kelly. Um, at the same time, I think kids sometimes do have a strong ability to be in the moment. Sometimes
Hmm.
even more so than adults.
Wow.
I think sometimes,
Yeah.
we carry so much around with us, and I think kids sometimes can be lighter and less worried about things, and
Hmm.
sometimes can really be focused
Mhm.
Right.
on
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so when you have kids like that, you would think maybe if you notice how they are focused, maybe it's a great thing as a coach to talk to those kids and find out, hey, when you seem to be in that moment, what's going on in your mind? What are you thinking about? And even then having that kid share that with his teammates, or if there's several kids that do that, right? That's really important. Let the kids have a voice, let them have some control, and talk amongst themselves about, hey, this seems to work for me. Why don't you guys try it? But my point here is that, as we as coaches, we have to be part sports psychologists too, right? We have to get kids to focus on what's important, what they can control. And that's really what the Elm Tree of Mastery is all about. So we're going to talk about that. So praising effort over talent. Who knows who Carol Dweck is? Oh, a lot of you do. Okay, great. So you've read her 2006 $2 million bestseller.
Mhm.
It's called Mindset, right?
The Cliff Notes version.
The Cliff Notes version, the audio version.
I read it. I loved it.
And so those who have read it, what are those two different mindsets that Carol is talking about? What are the
Growth
two
mindset.
ones?
Yeah,
Yeah,
growth and
sorry.
fixed. That's good. Growth mindset and fixed mindset.
And so exactly right. So Carol basically has done a lot of research, psychology professor at Stanford University. She was at Harvard. She's a Brooklyn girl, actually. She grew up in the New York City school system, and saw things in her classroom when she was very young, how teachers treated certain kids as talented versus not talented. It wasn't even about effort or effort versus talent. But her studies have really been involving effort and talent, this fixed mindset, where you kind of are always told that you're very good, you have a certain skill set, a certain talent, and you're in that lane as a person. And anything that goes outside of that lane, challenges, things where you might fail, are more difficult for people like that because of that mindset. In the growth mindset, it's basically, I'm giving all my effort. I'm going to be a problem solver. I'm going to learn. I'm going to make mistakes. And that growth mindset really defines also this elm tree of mastery. So I have a great example of this, which happened in my own baseball team during the spring. We started the season with a catcher who could not play for the season. We had a first string catcher. And again, this is the spring of 2018. So our second string catcher was our starting pitcher. So we really didn't have a first string catcher, which made it very difficult for us going into the season. So at the first practice, we kind of looked around and we were kind of deciding like who could possibly fill that role. Now we have, in my school, it's a relatively new school. It started in 2012. We don't have a softball team. We have two girls on the team. So they had to pass the strength test in New York, and we were so happy to have them on the team because they added a terrific element. And one of those elements was one of the girls. She happened to be more of an upperclassman. We didn't have any seniors. She's a junior. And basically, we approached her after practice and we said, hey, do you think you'd like to try catching? And she said, well, I've never caught before. I'm a second baseman. I play softball. This is my first time playing baseball, but I'll give it a try. So that evening, as coaches, we got an email from her. And the email basically said, coaches, thank you very much for this opportunity, but now I want to learn. Send me some YouTube videos. Send me about blocking balls. Send me about pop time. And by the way, Saturday, I know we're not in school, but can we go to the cage and have some of the pitchers throw to me? I've never caught a pitcher before, and I've never caught a curveball before, and I want to practice my blocking. So we said, that is awesome. Now I typed back to her, you are someone who exemplifies a growth mindset, and this will serve you very well in your entire life. Now I have any idea that she knows exactly what that meant when I said that, but she did. And so we went through the season, We made the playoffs. In the semifinal game, we actually beat the defending champions. And in the final game, we lost. But it was time, based on coaches' votes around the league, to give out the all-conference trophies. We had 2 players that got them. And guess who got one of them?
Your catcher.
So if you look here, it's the girl in the front holding the trophy with the catcher's gear on. She's actually the one that throughout the season, again, something that she wasn't sure about, she learned. She made mistakes, and we as coaches, we basically let her, you know, and she learned from that. And that's what we want to kind of say as coaches. We want to have players in this growth mindset and give them the opportunity to make mistakes and get better. And she's a perfect example. So Carol Dweck will play this this video for you. In this video, what I'd like you to think about, maybe 1 or 2 points that she's making here that you feel is really important. Playing the video. Now, you both know the video, so perhaps you'd like to just give some input in terms of some of the points that she's making.
Sure. What stuck out for me, and I say this a lot, but it really did stuck out for me, was do the kids know, do your players know that you value effort and practice? And that was the first time I saw this. I thought, well, of course I value effort and practice. But then when they said, well, the kids that you coach say that you value effort and practice, I thought, oh my gosh, well, don't ask them. But I didn't know if I was articulating that well to my players.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Ruben, anything to add?
And in addition, the fact that the players knowing that you value effort, that alone will increase their, you know, their work ethic and their commitment. And
yeah. I think another important point that she says is that coaches who value effort over talent actually improve more. I think that's really an important point. So a meaningful athletic experience, how do you get athletes to actually believe that they can improve, that they can get better? That might be a tough question on its own, but if you think about it a little bit, in terms of what we're talking about here so far in this particular coaching model, how do you get athletes to believe that they can get better? Anyone?
Well, you can make sure that they are aware of small improvements that they're making along the way, even as they continue to make mistakes and experience failure. That I could see it's easy for an athlete to not be aware of progress. So I think it's our role, our job as coaches, to make sure that we let them know that they're when they are making progress.
Yeah. So one of the things that we can do is tell them that you value effort more than talent. What's a really powerful tool is when you start your season, at the very beginning, before you even have a practice, maybe you have a meeting with your kids, or maybe you're out on the field, and you tell them, hey, we as a coaching staff, we value effort more than we do talent. We value effort more than talent. And you make that point very clear and very strong. Now, when you do that, what does that tell the kids from A to Z on your team? If you're looking at that, maybe those kids that are just new to the sport or don't feel that they are the starting team, what message does that send to them? My coach values effort more than talent.
That they can work, they can show that they're working hard, and they're going to be rewarded for it.
Right.
There's a place for me on this team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I can also, if I give that effort, I'm going to have the opportunity to be an equal with those people that I always view as being maybe more so talented than I am, and have been starting players that have been playing for a while. So what message are we sending to those kids that are starters that have been playing for a while? I value effort more than talent.
I can't just rest on my past accomplishments and.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now you think about it, right? You've got everybody thinking about effort on that team. That's now in the forefront of their minds, and now everybody is pretty much equal that way. So let me ask you a question. This goes back to a comment that someone made before. as coaches, like what kids see in terms of my coach may value something more than something else. They may value talent more than effort. But you as a coach, if you could look at a pie chart and 75% of that pie chart is filled with talented players, 25% is filled with full out effort players. Another pie chart, 75% of that pie chart is got the full out effort players and 25% have talent players. Which team would you rather coach? Who would rather coach the more talented team?
I was going to say, it depends how old they are and what point in the season we're talking about.
Okay.
No,
okay.
I mean, at a younger age, I'd rather take the effort players any day.
Right. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd want the effort players too, but you know, you like having some talent, and Brad Stevens in one of our PCA videos says that he talks about how effort is so important and can make such a difference, but he does throw in the caveat if your talent level is I don't know, is appropriate or
it's
something.
Appropriate, yeah.
So he basically is saying that, you know, you got to have enough talent, otherwise,
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I would change that equation to maybe 60% talent, 40% effort, because I think that was maybe a little bit top heavy in that particular case.
Okay.
So become a noticer of effort. So there's so many opportunities for us as coaches to really see everything that goes out on the field, right? Certain teams, like football coaches, they have all these different types of linebacker coaches, secondary coaches, offensive line coaches. They can pinpoint basically what's happening with their own players. But we as youth coaches, you know, we have 1 or 2 coaches, 3 coaches on a team. It's hard to see everything. But we have to start getting maybe into that mindset now of becoming a noticer of effort, because it's easy for us to always be watching the player with the ball. It's easy for us to watch the player with the puck on the ice. It's easy for us to watch the goalie as they're making a save, which of course we want to do. And it's easy for us to watch the player with the broom. Anyone curling coach out here? No. Nope. Okay. It's not that type of sport here in the Northeast, certainly. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of being a noticer of effort. And then we want to attribute success to effort. And also effort involves just maybe not having a successful outcome. And we want to praise that type of effort also. We're going to talk about that in a little while. So I'd like them to read this particular quote. That was a great play. You've really been working hard in practice, and it shows. So I would like to take that first sentence. That was a great play. How could we make that a little bit more definitive? You can use a specific example. Anyone?
You really got your glove down and in front of you and in position early.
Perfect. So the more specific you are with this praise, the more it connects with the player, and the more likely they'll be doing that again and again, because what gets rewarded gets repeated. Okay. I was hoping everyone in unison and the crowd would say repeated.
Of course, we all did.
Thank you. Okay, the elm tree of mastery. You know, there are 2 famous elm trees in the history of the United States. The first one was back in the 1770s. You might remember. I know you weren't there.
Yeah.
But the Sons of Liberty on Boylston Street in Boston, they met under the Liberty Tree. And that Liberty Tree was an elm tree. So it has a famous place in American history. The second most famous elm tree is the elm tree of mastery. Now, why do I say that? If you Google elm tree of mastery, you're going to come up with about 400,000 search results. Now, this is a PCA movement, by the way. So this is PCA speak. And the reason why it's so popular is because out of all the years that the PCA has done workshops, all the associations that have learned about the elm tree of mastery, they really use it. And they put this on their websites. They talk about it. They may not always credit the PCA. You may not see the PCA there, but this is really the principle that connects with a lot of coaches, and not only youth coaches, but college coaches, professional coaches also. Just a little bit of trivia. So the two definitions, the scoreboard definition and the mastery definition, I'm going to scroll through these. So there's three here. You have results, effort, comparison with others, learning, mistakes are okay, mistakes are not okay, mistakes are okay. I'm going to read you 3 quotes from a coach about each one of these. It's one particular coach that's actually talking about this. So results and effort. This coach said, did I win? Did I lose? Those are not the right questions. Did I give my all in practice? Did I give my all in the games? That's what matters most. Did I win? Did I lose? Those are not the right questions. So the coach had to say. About comparison with others. If I am worrying about the other person and what they are doing, I'm not going to be able to do what I am capable of doing. That's his second quote. And his third quote about mistakes. If you are not making mistakes, then you are not doing anything. I am positive that a doer makes mistakes. Does anybody want to take a guess at who actually said that? I'll give you a hint. He won 10 NCAA Division I championships in 12 years.
Kelly's going to guess.
And he won 88. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Kelly's going to guess that it's John Wooden.
That was my guess, yes.
It is John Wooden. So John Wooden is thought really as a role model for coaching and success in coaching. But he wasn't really focused on the scoreboard part of the game. He was focused more about developing the individual, making them part of the team, working hard, having a lot of effort, making mistakes, because that's how you learn. There's a quote by Michael Jordan about, you've probably read this, it's on posters and things like that, where it talks about I've made 9,000 shots, I've missed 9,000 shots, and it goes through a whole thing of all the terrible things that he did, but he said that's why I'm a success, because I really gave the effort and I learned from my mistakes. And that's what this mastery definition is all about. Oh, I'm sorry. Take a drink if you have to. So mistakes, let's just talk about the mistake portion, because I see this a lot with coaching. You know, mistakes are not okay with a lot of coaches. What happens typically, you could do body language, for example. You know, if a person makes an error in the field or something goes wrong, and a lot of coaches kind of just give nonverbal body language. So they'll throw their hands up, they'll turn their back. What message are we sending to kids when we do that?
That they've failed, they made a mistake.
Right.
Yeah, that mistakes aren't okay.
Right. So, and also when we there's a Steve Mariucci actually had said this. He's part of the PCA, also the former NFL coach. He said when you kind of beat down players about mistakes, you're bringing them down a lower level, and now it's going to be that much harder to get them back up to where they should be, you know, as a performer. So mistakes cause tension, they cause anxiety. Sure, they do. There's a way to get through them as coaches to help. But those coaches that kind of focus in on those, it makes for players that they want to give up. They don't want the ball hit to them. They don't want the puck passed to them. They don't want to take the shot in basketball because they have that fear of making a mistake. So in the Elm Tree of Mastery, research shows in that climate, anxiety goes down and self-confidence goes up. Can you say why that is in this mastery environment? Starts with a C.
I was going to say, because they can control it. If they're in charge of what they can control, they're going to be less anxious.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the right answer. And Ruben had the same answer, but he didn't have a chance to answer.
I'm a little too quick to the punch sometimes.
So the Elm Tree of Mastery gives players a feeling of control. When you have control, again, think about it in your own life, anything that you have control over, less stress, less anxiety, more confidence. Things that you can control and things that impact you in your life, it causes tension and stress. And that's the way it is for players too when they're on the field. There's a lot that they have to deal with. So that control allows players to work harder and stick to it longer. So what I'd like you to do is to pair up. Just pair up with the person next to you. Let's talk about this control, this effort and control variable. So when you have a practice, think about what your players can control during the practice. And this would translate into the games. Just discuss maybe a few ways amongst yourselves, players, what they can control. We know effort is certainly one of them, but also how we could actually make this a positive for our players in the practice environment. Okay. Any ideas or thoughts, volunteers?
I used to just tell my players all the time, you can control your attitude and your effort. And so I just have that stuck in my head that they can control how they respond to things, but they can't control the actual thing that's happening. They can just control how they respond to it mentally and physically.
Yep. Okay. So I'd like you to stay together for this next one. If there are other coaches in the room that have different coaches, actually what we'll do is we'll pair up with those. So who here is a soccer coach? Who's a basketball coach? Great. Who's a lacrosse coach? Who's a baseball coach? Okay, what I'd like you to do is not to stay in these pairs, but actually to get up and find a person in the room that coaches a different sport than you. We're talking about now in the moment, playing. Your team is playing tentatively, and the other opponent is driving the action. Your team is not being aggressive at all. What can you do? What can you do in a timeout situation, between inning situation? Again, different skill sets, but valuable to talk amongst different sports. So please spend a moment and talk about that. Okay, thoughts about that? What can you do? Any volunteers?
Well, I think based on what we were talking about earlier, we got to find a way to get their focus off outcomes, results, whether we're winning or losing.
Right.
So I guess my communication with the players would be all about what's our strategy. What do we want to accomplish in this next part of the game?
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, you're going to make sure that you box out.
Right.
John, you're going to make sure that you look for the open person, et cetera.
Right. So those are great examples, because those are examples of being in the moment, right? Not thinking, like you said, not thinking about what's going on the scoreboard, but actually focusing on what you can control in that particular moment. Kelly, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just matched up with somebody that was a swim coach, and I really was having trouble figuring out how that an opponent can drive the action in swimming. But it was the same kind of a thing, just talking about how, just being intimidated by the opponent based on how they're swimming versus what I can do. And I can't do a 100 freestyle in less than a minute, but I can beat them off the block, or I can try to, come in hard on the turn, things like that.
You can't use the excuse, hey, you splashed water in my face.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work.
That doesn't work. Okay. Okay, what I'd like you to do, we're going to talk about the toolkit now, the Elm Tree Toolkit. So I'd like you to turn to page 21 in your Double Goal Coach book. And this is the Elm Tree of Mastery Toolkit. And by the way, for any particular, and I said this earlier after we were talking about filling the emotional tank, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it shortly again with honoring the game. I'd like to this is a great guide, by the way, to go back to. You're not going to remember everything that basically was said here tonight, or some of the things that you've done. But you can always go back to this book and say, hey, this wasn't mentioned in the workshop. There's a particular tool I'd like to try out. So go back to the book and use that. So we'll go back to this again. Focusing on effort is the key to performance. We're gonna reference this in just one second. So I mentioned it earlier about watching the ball. We tend to just look at where the action is. I had an example on my school team, and this was I mentioned before about the games that we had played. We were in the semifinal game, which we won. We beat the defending champions. The score was actually 6-5. It was early in the game. The other team had first and third. There were 2 outs. Our catcher threw the ball down to second base. Shortstop made a great catch near the bag, tagged the runner, and that was the third out. So it kept their rally from going any further. Everybody went crazy, right? Everybody was high-fiving as they're running off the field. They were filling their emotional tanks for the shortstop and the catcher for sure. When the center fielder ran off, I had something to say to them that was very positive. What do you think I said to them? The center fielder. I see Ruben's on mute right now.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. So I might be assuming might be some of a baseball crowd here. So what I would say to them is, hey, you came in and you backed up that play. That was awesome. You were in a position, basically, if that ball got through, that effort to come in, typically kids just stand out in the outfield. You came running in and make sure if that ball got through, you were right there to get the ball so the runners wouldn't go any further. So basically, I filled their emotional tank. I was a noticer of effort in that case. And again, what gets rewarded gets repeated. That player will continue to do that because I've noticed it. And this is something that didn't happen. That player had nothing to do with the play that happened on the field. Now, let me ask you this. If that ball got through and it went to the center fielder, and the center fielder, it bounced off his glove and off to the side, and the runner on third scored, and the runner on second went to third, what should I have said to that kid? Any ideas?
I lost you. I'm listening to the baseball story, John, but I'm not listening specifically enough to tell me to tell you what play is going on.
Okay. So basically, if the player came in the same scenario, but only the ball went past second base to the center fielder who was backing up the play, but it was a miscue. It bounced off his glove to the side. A run scored. The other runner went to third base. What should I have said to that player when they ran off the field? The first time I said, hey, great effort. You backed up the play. Terrific. What should I say that second time?
I think you could still say great effort. I mean, just because it bounced off his glove doesn't mean that he didn't try hard to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So what you're rewarding here is not necessarily the outcome. It was not a successful outcome in this case, but it was the effort. Right? It was the effort that they backed up that play, even though it wasn't successful, because I want that player to continue to do that. If I chastise the player about making a mistake, in that case, that player's not going to back up that play again. And that's going to be important probably later on down the road. So if you can, turn to page 25 in your book, your Double Gold Coach book. And specifically, we're talking about effort goals and outcome goals. So what I'd like you to do is pair up with a person who's in the same sport as you. And I want you to come up with 3 particular effort goals that you can give to your team that they can work on. I mean, we have examples in the book, but let's be a little bit more creative and think about those. And we can expand on those after time too. And you can have a running list of what those are, and you can use them in practice, for example. Okay, so we have a short break. They're talking about it, and then they come up with a few additional effort goals. And the point here again is that, you know, those players that we talked about at the beginning about effort versus talent, and that's the message that we send to our kids. You know, the kids that are maybe struggling a little bit, we can give them these effort goals and they'll feel good about themselves. You know, I accomplished this particular goal that the coach had asked me to do. So their tanks are being filled that way also. The second takeaway is assertive aggressive play comes when there's no fear of mistakes. You might have remembered in the first portion, I talked about Ken Ravizza and Cal State Fullerton. And basically, I mentioned that they were 15-16 at one point in their season. They were a good team, but they weren't doing all that well. And so they brought in Ken, and Ken instituted a mistake ritual, basically. And that mistake ritual was this tiny toy toilet bowl with a flushing sound. And so he put it in the dugout. When the players made a mistake, they would come in, they would flush away their mistake. It was a great tool. They realized too, though, hey, these kids are out in the field. It's in the middle of an inning. If they make a mistake, what do? They can't run into the dugout and flush the toilet and run back out on the field. So they improvised by having this little tiny toilet on their belt, and they would use that and flush. And so they would be able to do that in the moment. So again, what happened was they won 32-5 the rest of the season. They went to the College World Series. They won the national championship. And when it was all over, they brought in Ken Ravizza, and they celebrated with Ken. And it was a great, like I said, a great tool that he instituted there. Now, there are other ways that you can do. Does anybody use a mistake ritual, by the way?
I use Shake It Off with my players. The Taylor Swift song. I have a bunch of little girls under the age of 10, and they love Taylor Swift. So we shake it off. We make a little dance, and we dance around, and we shake off mistakes.
There's a very well-known coach from Stanford University, a volleyball coach, former Division I coach at Stanford. He won the national championship in 1997. He was twice coach of the year. In 97, he was 27-3. He had turned the page as his mistake ritual, which really worked for Stanford because they're very scholarly there. So turn the page really connected with their players. I think his name is Ruben Nieves, by the way. He's part of the PCA.
Yes, he is.
Okay. And he's on mute right now. I thought he might want to comment on that a little bit more. Maybe it wasn't turn the page. But I think
I think go through the curtain, turn the page. He had both of them, I think.
Right. That's what I think it was. Okay. So we're going to go now to an example of a mistake ritual, and that is Curtis Granderson. Curtis Granderson just won the Marvin Miller Award for the 3rd time, most times ever for a major league player. And that has to do with his community service and also his play on the field. He's been through a number of teams. He played for the Yankees, the Mets, the Tigers, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays. He just recently played for the Brewers. And by the way, the reason I know this is because in our family, Curtis Granderson is a favorite. We love him because he is such a positive guy, and he's such a gentleman too on the field. He really, we'll talk about Honor of the Game in a second, but he has his Grandkids Foundation serving 18 million meals over 10 years to underprivileged families. Basically, 1 million kids have been introduced to baseball through him. He's got a sports complex, multi-million-dollar complex. 100 or 10,000 kids have recreation there every year. And so I am very proud, as being part of the PCA, to be associated with somebody like Curtis Granderson. So we're going to play this video here of Curtis. And he's talking about that same mistake ritual, which is flush away your mistakes. So that's a great lead into the next segment, which is about integrity and honoring the game. I mentioned Curtis Granderson. If you're here in New York, you know about him, and you know how about he honors the game. So this particular portion is about, we talked about, Herm Edwards talked about how do you want to be remembered as a coach? Well, this is part of it, but how do you want to be remembered as a team? How you led your team, how your team acted, you know, in the game situation and off the field. And so we're going to get into that now. Okay.
All right. John, I'm going to cut you off because I have 4 minutes and I have to get my daughter out the door.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I had a chance to give you some comments.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Ruben, I don't know if you heard him. He gave you some props there while you were away for a minute. You have to go back and listen. You're on mute still.
Okay. All right.
He was sharing about a well-known coach at Stanford, and
oh, gee,
you'll have to go back and watch. Yeah. So.
Hey,
go ahead.
Kelly, let me just say a couple things, and then I'm going to give you the rest of the time.
Yeah, I actually have to go in a couple minutes. That's why I cut John off.
Yeah, and I do too. So, hey, John, I really like how you make this a role play. You really put yourself into trainer mode, and you really turn it into a as realistic a practice as it can be. I really like that. I think you've developed a great library. Your preparation is clear. Great library. And I think, you know, the challenge for you is going to be, okay, which parts of that library do I use in any given workshop, and not try to do everything in every workshop. So
right.
I think you're in a really good place. So I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I agree. I agree with everything. My best comment is, John, again, I said this last time too, I was taking notes. I love the extra little stories, the extra prep, the little facts you put in there. That to me is so interesting. And I think maybe it's because I've heard the basic stuff for so long that it's nice to hear something different. But I think on the other hand, you know, you make it local, you make it relevant, you make it current. And that's something that is so valuable. I think the biggest challenge for you is going to be timing of it, as Ruben said. You know, to get through a full 2-hour workshop, it was almost 40 minutes for this principle alone. And that wasn't having us break out and share So I think, again, that's really hard to do when you've got such good stuff, is picking and choosing. Right. I sometimes have to stop myself and skip something that I really want to do because one of the coaches got off on a tangent that was a really good tangent, and you actually almost have to skip things. So I always say too, like, if I leave them wanting more, then they'll want more. Then they'll go in the book and they'll go on the website and they'll discover more things. But if I tell them everything right up front, then, you know, they're not going to want to learn more because they've heard everything. So I'm just going to give you a couple things that I really liked. I do, as I said, I like the extra stories. I think Clear the Mechanism was a great example. And I'd love to even find that video, because I think that would be a great video clip to show at a workshop, just of that second. I do remember that part of the movie.
If you type that in on YouTube, you'll get that little vignette. It's about 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, I think that would be actually a good video, just to show the example of what we mean by controlling what you can control. I think that's great. The details, I didn't even think about I knew Carol Dweck was from Brooklyn, but I think that was great, especially you being in New York, giving her credit for that. I think it's great. I love your personal stories. I love the story about the catcher. I think that's a great example. So I would definitely keep that in there. I think sometimes when you did the intro part before we even got to the principal, I think that was a little bit long. You went a lot into about, you know, controlling and is it easy? Is it hard? I think that section could literally have been about 1 minute, and you kind of strung it out. Because the easy and the hard question, like, it's kind of a rhetorical question. You know, we know the answer you're looking for, so it's not really a thought-provoking question. I like questions more of, why is it so hard? Or how can we make it easier? And that's what you're going to get into later. So I would definitely shorten that section out. I never Googled the Elm Tree of Mastery, and I was fascinated there were 400 different results for that. So I think that's
400,000.
Yeah, I mean 400,000. That's what I mean. I think that's pretty interesting. So I would keep that in there. That's pretty neat. I'm a huge John Wooden fan, so I love any of his quotes too. Again, when you did like a pair share, I think pair shares are great. Come up with other partners. But what I like to do too is sometimes you can make an like the idea of pair share, talk about what you control and what you can't control. That can just be a shout out. Give me 5 things in any game that you have no control over. Give me 5 things in any game that you do have control over, because the scenario is coming up after that. And we want them to actually share with the group about the scenario and how they would handle that. So I don't know that I would do 2 pair activities right back to back. Just to save time. Again, save time for logistics reasons. Also, when you're asking them to get into groups by sport or a sport they don't coach, you know, there's a couple different ways to do that, just to make it a little bit quicker as well.
I saw your way, which was act out.
Yeah, I mean,
batting or swimming or
yeah, it's hard because a lot of people coach multiple sports, so it's hard for you to say get with a coach that doesn't coach the same sport. It takes them like 5 minutes to find a group.
I realize that.
And again, all those little minutes, they add up to like, wow, I just spent 34 minutes and I didn't really haven't done much. So again, the baseball story I think is a good story, but I lost you because I'm not a baseball person. So you're, you know, here I am in a multiple sport workshop and you're giving such a specific baseball example. I followed you for a little bit of it, but when you're like, what should I have said? And you put me on the spot, I'm like, oh crap, I don't even know. And I'll be there in 1 second. I'm going 1 second.
Okay.
So I think you can either ask for a story from the coaches themselves, ask them to think of a story, them to think of a situation, or just think of a player and what's an effort goal that you would have told them to focus on, rather than, oh my gosh, you missed the ball. What's something that you can reward their effort? So just like more like 1 sentence things rather than having us come into your story. I want to pull out stories from the coaches.
Right.
So I personally would love to see you do the final demo on a different principle and focus on trying to make it more concise. Ruben often also has said over the years, if you've got a 5-minute story, see if you can say it in 60 seconds. And not leave out any details. I mean, not leave out any of the important details, but see if you can make it a little bit more concise. So that's what I'd like to, that's my challenge for you.
Okay. So my premise in this was kind of do the A presentation. In other words, the A, B, and C. You know, I know from sales that basically the A presentation is all the information, the B, you scale it down, and the C is really quick. So I did the A presentation where I've got all that preparation on each one. And that's why I spoke to it this way. But you know, cutting it down is not difficult. So
no, and it's not even cutting it down or making it quick. It's picking and choosing where to use what best. So, and I think you're going to be fine with that, but I'd like to see it.
Right. Okay.
All right. I got to skedaddle. My daughter's got to be in the water. In 2 minutes, so
thanks, John. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, guys.
Nice, guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks.